Well, hello and welcome back to my class. Today we are actually in my classroom, as you can see, and we're going to be kind of talking about some pretty cool stuff, some fun stuff, interesting stuff, and no boring stuff. We never talk about boring stuff in history. Never. History is fun. So let's get started. So the colony we're going to talk about today is actually the last one that Britain would ever settle in America, and that would be good old Georgia. Now, Georgia would be settled in 1733 by a general of the name James Oglethorpe. I know, some weird name, but this dude was an okay dude. Later on, he would have some problems, but we'll get to that later. But right now, Georgia was created for a couple purposes. The first one was it was a place for British people that were debtors and that were poor to be able to go and get a fresh start. Now, in Britain, if you are a debtor, that meant that you could not pay back your debt, which meant you would go to jail. And a lot of people don't like to go to jail. I wouldn't like to go to jail. I probably wouldn't last a minute in there. Probably not. Probably die. But anyways, that's besides the point. So not only did Britain create this new colony just for the poor and the debtors, they also created it because, hey, this is actually going to be a pretty good tactical spot so that we don't get invaded by Spain. Now, if you remember back, we talked about in the 1700s how the Spanish and the British had a lot of wars going on. They did not like each other. All right, and so this was kind of a way to keep Spain out of their colonies. Now, if we kind of remember back, Spain owned Florida. That was a long time ago when we talked about that. But Spain owned Florida. And so they wanted kind of a little place in between Spain and South Carolina where they could have some territory, where they could put some military bases around there and forts so they could stop the Spanish from kind of invading. So that was a perfect reason why Georgia could be a thing. Hey, there's some land right there. Let's go take it from the natives. Let's push them out. That way we have some defense. And it worked. It stopped a lot of wars between the British and Spain, and the Spanish and the colonies. So in 1733, James would bring over some people that he liked to call the sober, industrial, moral persons. Now, that of course would not totally be true, and we're going to kind of see that here in a bit on what actually happened. The first thing is that he wanted you to be very hardworking. The second was you had to be independent. And lastly, the last thing was Protestant. Now, not only that, but he would also put a limit on how big of a farm you could have, as well as no slavery. You couldn't have slaves, on top of no rum. Now, alcohol obviously is very addictive, and so trying to tell people you can't have it now, they're going to get a little upset. And that's kind of what happened. So instead of the kind of idea that debtors would come over to Georgia, there really were very few that did. There were hundreds, however, of poor people that decided to come for a new start. If you could get a fresh start and you were poor from one country, you'd love to do that. It's a totally new world. Okay? Literally, they call it the New World. Totally new. And so these people came over and started to become pretty successful. There also were Germans and Swedish people that would come over basically for religious freedom, persecuted from the Catholics. Catholics were not allowed. Not allowed at all. In fact, they were banned. It was, if you were Catholic, you were not allowed to be in the colony at the time. So over time, more and more people that were non-British started to settle there. So much that this colony would actually have the highest population of non-British citizens or colonists out of all the American colonies. Now, over time, James would get a lot of comments and a lot of backlash on how he ran his country. One of the biggest things was people wanted to be able to have a bigger farm, slaves, as well as rum. Over time, he basically backed down and said, okay, you guys can have your rum, you guys can have your slaves, and you guys can have more land. Finally, around 1751, James finally said, all right, I'm done. I'm giving this back to the king. Y'all are too much for me. All right. So that's kind of the last kind of colony we're going to talk about. Georgia started out from being the debtors. People didn't like being the debtors, so they came over to Georgia to make a new life, on top of a lot of poor people, on top of a lot of people for religious freedoms. All right, so again, you have this kind of place where people can say, hey, I can start a new life, I can be free, and for the most part, I can live the way I want. And eventually, it was that way. All right, I will see you guys next time. Make sure you do your homework. I'm watching you. I'm not really watching, that'd be weird. But make sure you do it and have a spectacular day. Peace.